Hey everyone, Bujiro here again, and here again, just grinding here in Minecraft, and as usual, my mind is racing with those deep life questions. Honestly, thinking and talking about relationships can be so frustrating sometimes. I'm just not the type of guy who connects with people easily, you know? And whenever I actually do let someone in, it feels like I always end up getting burned. It's exhausting. It leaves me feeling totally frustrated, and if I'm being real with you guys, just straight up scared to even try loving someone again. I'm afraid of loving again. And I know it sounds dramatic when I say it like that, but it's the most honest truth I can put into words right now. It's not that fleeting fear that disappears after a few months once you're doing well again. It's different. It's a fear that has settled inside me in a way that I can't simply ignore or pretend doesn't exist. I've truly loved once. I know what that is, and I also know what happens when it ends. And it's exactly that second point that won't leave my head. Before all of this happened, I was a different person. I believed the things people said. I trusted what I felt. I didn't spend my time analyzing every detail, trying to find some sign that it was about to go wrong. I simply lived it. And today I look at that version of myself and hardly recognize it, because that person feels so distant from who I am now. And I can't exactly say when that change happened, but it did, and there was no going back. The problem isn't just the pain itself. Everyone understands pain. Everyone has been through some version of it. The problem is what the pain leaves behind after it's gone. It changes how you process things. It changes how you receive people. It changes how you interpret situations that before would have been completely normal. And the worst part is that this doesn't show up in an obvious way. You don't wake up one day thinking you're different. You just start noticing it bit by bit when you try to connect with someone again and feel like there's an invisible limit you created without meaning to. I remember something I learned the hardest way possible. When you go all in, when you hold nothing back, when you give the most real parts of yourself, you become completely exposed. And being exposed isn't a comfortable place to be, especially when the other person decides they don't want it anymore. Because it's not just the breakup that hurts, it's the feeling of having been seen in your entirety and still not being enough. That's the kind of thing that doesn't leave your head easily. And then comes the question I sometimes ask myself, and that maybe you've asked yourself too. How does someone who was so present in your life simply vanish? How does a person who knew your habits, your fears, your inside jokes suddenly act like you're a stranger? I'm not talking about a gradual drifting apart. I'm talking about that sharp turn where something changes from one day to the next and you're left standing there trying to understand what happened. Because when it happens without explanation, without closure, the mind fills that void with the worst possible hypotheses. After that happens, you can't just believe in words anymore. Someone can say exactly what you want to hear. They can seem genuine. They can act in a way completely different from everything that hurt you before. And yet, there's a part of you that won't let its guard down. Not because that person did something wrong, but because you've heard similar things before and saw how it ended. And your brain recorded that. It doesn't forget. And it will remind you of it every time something starts to feel too good. The most exhausting part of this whole process isn't the longing. It's after that happens, you can't just believe in words anymore. Someone can say exactly what you want to hear. They can seem genuine. They can act in a way completely different from everything that hurt you before. And yet, there's a part of you that won't let its guard down. Not because that person did something wrong, but because you've heard similar things before and saw how it ended. And your brain recorded that. It doesn't forget. And it will remind you of it every time something starts to feel too good. The most exhausting part of this whole process isn't the longing. It's not the anger. It's not any intense or obvious feeling. The most exhausting part is that quiet voice in the back of your head. The one that says, don't get attached. Don't believe it yet. Wait a little longer to see. Because you still want to be present. You still want to enjoy the moment. You still want to believe that this time could be different. But that voice won't let you rest. It's always there, monitoring everything, waiting for the next danger signal. You start acting differently without realizing it. It's not a conscious decision to close yourself off. It's automatic. You take longer to reply. You keep conversations on a more superficial level. You don't share the things that really matter. And you justify this to yourself by saying you're being cautious, that you're learning from the past. But deep down, you know you're avoiding being known. Because being known means giving the other person the necessary material to truly hurt you. And so I have to ask you something. Have you ever realized you were pushing someone away before even giving them a real chance? Not because the person did something wrong, but simply because it reached a point of closeness that scared you. Because I've done that, and it's strange to admit, because in the moment, you don't see it that way. In the moment, it feels like you're being realistic, like you're protecting yourself. Only later do you look back and realize that you were the one who closed the door before anyone could walk in. Love used to be exciting. It was that energy of not knowing what's going to happen but wanting to find out. Now it's a calculation. You start thinking in terms of risk and return before anything even happens. Where can this lead? Is the emotional investment worth it? What if it doesn't work out? And these questions replace the feeling. You stop being inside the experience and start observing it from the outside, trying to predict the ending before reaching the middle. What most people don't see is what happens after it ends. People see the relationship, they see the end, and they move on. But they don't see how it reorganizes everything inside of you. The routine that changes, the places that now carry a different weight, the songs you can't listen to the same way anymore, the time it takes for you to feel whole again. That's not being oversensitive. That is the real cost of having truly loved someone. And once you pay that cost once, you become much more reluctant to pay it again.
What caught me by surprise was realizing how much of this was still in me when I tried to move forward. Because I thought I had processed everything. I thought I was fine. But when something new started to appear, I felt the freeze. That moment that should be exciting, but instead was tense. And I realized I hadn't processed as much as I imagined. I had just learned to function with it inside, which is completely different from being healed. There's one thing I've had to accept that is quite hard to swallow. What happened to me didn't just make me stronger, it made me different. And not every difference is an improvement. Some things I lost in this process I still haven't recovered. The lightness of believing in people without questioning, the ability to be in a moment without already anticipating the end, that more open version of me that existed before. And I don't know if I want to go back to being that person because she got hurt a lot, but I also miss her. Sometimes I wonder what would have been different if I had protected myself more before, if I had put on the brakes at some point. But then I realize that is exactly the trap, because you can't love halfway and call it love. And it was exactly because I went all in that the loss was so heavy. It's almost a cruel equation. The more real you are, the more exposed you become. And the more exposed you are, the deeper you go when you fall. Today, I realize that when something starts to look good, my first reaction isn't joy, it's an alert. It's that feeling that the better it seems, the greater the fall will be when it falls apart. And I know that's not healthy. I know it stops me from living things that could be real and good. But knowing that doesn't turn off the mechanism. You can be fully aware of a pattern of yours and still not be able to simply stop repeating it, because it's etched at a level that goes beyond logic. There's a kind of bitterness that doesn't show up aggressively. It's not declared anger. It's not a grudge you wear openly. It's more subtle. It's the way you start assuming things about people before they even do anything. It's waiting for them to lose interest, waiting for them to change, waiting for that moment when they'll prove you were right not to trust. And the worst part is that when you're in this mode, you almost root for it to happen, not because you want to be hurt, but because the confirmation hurts less than the surprise. And there's a very specific moment that I think many people have experienced. You're with someone who seems genuine, who is doing everything right, who hasn't given you any real reason to doubt, and yet you feel that tightness, that discomfort of being too close, and you pull back, Not in a dramatic way, but you pull back. You create a small distance, just enough to feel safe again. And you can't even explain to the person what happened because actually nothing happened, just your own fear doing overtime.
Being stuck between wanting to connect and being afraid to connect is one of the most draining experiences there is. Because you're not suffering in a visible way. You're functioning normally, living your life, showing up in places, but internally you are always divided. If you open up, you feel too vulnerable. If you close off, you feel empty. And you keep trying to find a middle ground that never feels completely comfortable. It's like trying to sleep in a position that never feels quite right. What I want to be clear is that this fear didn't come from nowhere. It isn't irrational. It has an origin. It has a name. It came from something that actually happened, that left a real mark, that changed something inside of me permanently. And I think it's important to name that instead of pretending I'm overreacting or being dramatic, because minimizing what you feel doesn't solve it. It just pushes it under the rug until there's no more room. I don't know if I'll be able to love the same way as before. Honestly, I don't think so. That naive version, completely open, that didn't calculate anything, isn't coming back. And maybe it doesn't need to, but I also don't want fear to have the last word. I don't want to look back years from now and realize I let real things pass by because I was too busy protecting myself from something that might never have happened. The idea I'm trying to accept is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be either closing off completely or giving everything all at once. There is a space between those two extremes, where you can be honest without being reckless, where you can be present without being completely exposed, where you can trust the process without ignoring what you've learned. I'm still trying to find that space, but I think the fact that I'm looking for it already says something. So yes, I'm still afraid, and I'm not pretending I'm not. But I also know that this fear isn't the end of the story. It's just the part that happens before you decide whether you're going to try again or not. And I still don't know what my answer will be. But I know that the question is still open. And for now, that's enough to keep going.